Okay. With the lovely serenade of the deerling next door today. When my Aunt Mary first visited Sera, it was 2013, she commented, she said, when she was coming, her friends asked her, "Oh, you're going to visit a Tibetan monastery. Are you going to be allowed to talk?" She said, "Now that I lived here, I know you're barely able to hear." That seems to be part of the practice, I think, in our monastery. It's not meant for just isolating yourself. You have to be able to stay focused and concentrated amidst the turmoil and noise and goings on of the monastery. But nevertheless, it's isolated from a lot of things, even if noise isn't one of them. So, last week we were talking about the meditation session, right? So, if you recall, this was in the context of the section on the teacher. And we have the actual among the subject, the outlines of the text. Then we had the greatness of the author, the greatness of the Dharma, and so forth. And then the fourth outline was the actual instruction and how you guided the disciple through the actual instructions. That has two parts, right? Alam gitsawa shenen jida den pitsul tang, dene lo jida kyangwetsul, right? So the root of the path, how to rely on the spiritual teacher, and then having relied on the teacher, then how to train your mind. So that part on the spiritual teacher, it has two parts, right? It has Jungse Tro De Shinin Densu, right? So a slight digression, and then actually explaining how to rely on the teacher, which is the main section. And then the Kyongsu Nu, the actual way of sustaining the meditation session. So that's what we're here now, and it actually has nothing particularly to do with meditation on the spiritual teacher, just because that's the first major section of the text. Then Tsongkhapa explains how to sustain a meditation session and how to practice between sessions, but it's applicable to the entire texts. So you use the same format for meditating in any of its topics that are covered in the LAM.RIM. So anyway, this section on the way of meditating, right? Kyongsu Dordu Denpa as the Kyongsu Ngu and the Lokto Kappa, right? So the actual way of sustaining the meditation session, and then dispelling wrong views regarding meditation. As I said before, that's about the view that meditation is simply a matter of sitting quietly and doing nothing, as opposed to using analysis, which Tsongkhapa confronts that again and again throughout this text. So within this first section on the Kyongsu Ngu, you have Tungi Ngo, the Jidai Kyongwa, right? So the way of practicing during the meditation session. And then Tungi Samsu, Jidar Kyongwa, like during the breaks between meditation session, how to sustain practice. Lama Tsongkhapa always would say, you have to understand a break of meditation session does not mean a break from Dharma practice. You don't have a break from Dharma practice, but you have the different kinds of Dharma practice. So you have the actual meditation and then post-meditation. So within the session, it has the preparatory part, which is what we were doing before. At the Joy Chodruk, the 6 preparatory practices. So one of these then was the dispelling the discordant conditions and then achieving the concordant conditions. That's the 5th section. So within that was the main one, right? So he goes to the 7 limb prayer based on the Zangju, right? The King of Prayers, it's called in English. Zangju does not mean King of Prayers. It means the great prayer of good deeds. But because the last stanza from the prayer, right? Moniki Gyalpo Dira Chugitso, right? This King of Prayers is the supreme best among the sublime. So then in English it I'm not sure how that tradition started, but it's referred to as the King of Prayers. So we went through the first 5, right? So the prostrations, and then offerings, confession, and then requesting, rejoicing, and then requesting, the 2 kinds of requests, right? So the 5th one was they're requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma. And then here we have the 6th one, so requesting not to pass into parinirvana. Oftentimes those are reversed in prayers, because there's not much use asking them to teach the Dharma if they've already passed into nirvana. But nevertheless, here the one about requesting to teach is first, and then the requesting to not pass into nirvana second. It's the same in the Lama Tsongkhapa, isn't it? You have the requesting to teach is in that verse, and then you have the requesting not to pass into nirvana. So Soadapi Enla, right, the branch of making request. So Nyang and Datum. So Nyang and Datum Gangshe Dedak La, Jowa Kuna Penching Dewe Cheer, Kappa Shingi Duni Shupayan, Dagitama Rabjar Sowargi. Right, so Nyang and Datum Gangshing Dedak La. So those who who will show the aspect of passing into parinirvana. Right, so parinirvana in Tibetan is Yongsu Zope, Nyang and Ledepa, right? Complete passing beyond sorrow. So it means that you give up your contaminated aggregates and pass into remainderless nirvana. Now, really, a Buddha wouldn't do that, but might show the aspect of doing that. So in order to request them not to do that, because it's our karma that keeps them in this world, so if we have the wish for them to stay here, then that will become the condition for that to ripen, for that karma to ripen. So Nyangye Datung Gang She Dedakla, those who wish to or have the intention to show that aspect, Joa Kona Penjing Dewe Chir. So in order to benefit and bring happiness to all migrators, Kappa Shingi Dunye Jupayan. So please continue to stay for as many aeons as there are atoms in the worlds, basically. Xing is fields, but means all the worlds. Dagitelma Rabjar Sowargi. So with folded hands, I fervently request you. So Shepit Sik Che Chi. So that one verse. Chokdu Shingdu Nyangan Le Dawit Su Tumpanam La. So in the 10 directions, all those who are showing the aspect of passing beyond sorrow. Nam La, Joana La, Puksu Pempata. So for all migrators, all sentient beings, so Puksu Pempa means in the long run, right? In the long run to benefit them. And Negapsu Dewa. So in the immediate sense, to bring them happiness. And in the long run to benefit them by leading them to liberation and enlightenment. Dewa Kewechir, so to generate happiness in the short run. Jing Kang Gi Du Trada Ki Trang Tan Yampe Kelpa. So as many atoms as there are equaling the number of subtle atoms, subtle particles. Really, Du is dust, right? That's how it's expressed in Tibetan. So subtle dust in subtle particles. As many as there are in the world systems. Nyangem Midawa Shupar. So do not pass beyond, but stay. So with inconceivable numbers of bodies, I make such a request. So you imagine your own body and inconceivable bodies. So then, usually here you then imagine offering Dharma throne, right? With their offer, they're requesting not to pass beyond, requesting to teach the Dharma. You imagine your infinite bodies offering the Dharma chakra, the Dharma wheel. But then with the request to not pass beyond sorrow, then you imagine offering empty thrones for them to be seated upon. So then finally, Ngoe Yenlak, right? The dedication. So this verse from Sangju also, it is a dedication, but also it has all 7 of the limbs listed. So sometimes, as a condensed way of doing the seven limb prayer, people just recite this one verse, right? So chaksel wa tang chuching shapa dang jesi hirang kushing so wa hi gewa jungse dagi jesa pa tamche zope jondrip chirng o. Right? So chaksel wa, so prostrating, chang chuching, so making offerings, and shakpa tang, so then confessing. Jizi hirang, so then rejoicing. Gujing, so then urging them to teach Dharma. Su Yi, then making a request to live long. Gewa jungse dagiti sapas, whatever small merit I have accumulated. Tamche zube jangjip chirungo o. All of that I dedicate to full enlightenment. Yeah, that last verse, it's funny. That last line, Tamche zube jangjip chirungo o. But then when we recite the Kanyama, so we're in Chura, right? It was one of the prayers we recite in the Chura prayers, the Kanyama, the prayer to the 6 ornaments of the world and the 2 supreme ones. These are the Nalanda masters. Then it's Tamche Dagi Janjip Chirungo O. So that seems to be a thing they do sometimes in Tibetan verses, that they take the verse, but then they change just one little piece of it to make it a little different in this different verse. So it can be confusing if you have to memorize both prayers. So if you ever get tripped up on that, just keep that in mind. Yeah, one is Tamche Zope Janjuk Chirungo, one is Tamche Dagi Janjuk Chirungo. So in one of them, then the I is implicit, as it often is in Tibetan. So everything dedicate to full enlightenment. This means everything I dedicate to full enlightenment. And the other one is everything I dedicate to enlightenment. So then the full is implicit there. So Gongi and la Druki Gewe, so with the virtue from those previous 6 limbs, Tsune, so that taken as the demonstrator, right? This is a common phrase in Tibetan, Gewe Tsune. So that's taken as like, that's just one example, but you think of all the virtue, not just the virtue you've done from this. So taking that as kind of the one that you're imagining, but that represents all virtue. Getsa Tamche, so all roots of virtue. Semjin Tamche Tong, Tumongdu Che De, so you take it in common with all sentient beings. All of us together are dedicating. Zobe Janduki Gyur Dupa Trakpo, so as the cause for complete enlightenment, and with a fervent aspiration, Nyewe, so that you dedicate that way, Namyami Zeboho, so then it will never exhaust. Right? Yeah, I like that stanza, right? Didar Gatsu Chuchik Sapana Gatsu Maze Bader de Maze Asian Zobe Janju Yang Owe Janjamato Bader de Maze. That's not exactly, I didn't say it exactly, but there's a Lodro Misepa Shupedo, isn't no Lodro Gatsu Shupedo. The sutra requested by Lodro Gatsu. There's that verse, it's often quoted that as if you drop one drop of water in the ocean until the ocean is exhausted, then that water won't exhaust because it mixes with the whole ocean. So likewise, if you dedicate your merit to full enlightenment, then until you achieve enlightenment, it won't exhaust. Now there's a debate about this in Uma, right? There's the Contra Getza Jompetsul, the way that anger destroys roots of virtue. So then some past Tibetans, they had said, well, if you dedicate it to full enlightenment, then anger cannot destroy your virtue. But Tsongkhapa says that's incorrect. Even if you dedicate to full enlightenment, it can still be destroyed by anger. So when you have that stanza from the Lodro Gatsu Shupe Do, saying it won't exhaust, it's saying, well, if you dedicate it, it will keep giving the result again and again. It won't just give one result, like if I do some good action and then it causes me to be born as a god, then it's exhausted. That's not what will happen. If I dedicate it to full enlightenment, then it will continue to support my path until full enlightenment. But if I destroy the roots of virtue with anger, then it won't do that. So it's not that it's impossible to destroy it. And then there's some people that said if you meditate on emptiness, it won't, and such and so forth. So Tsongkhapa is saying, based on Chandrakirti's explanation, he's saying all of these things, they won't really stop anger from destroying the roots of virtue. Right, it will does a number of things, right? Because there's different kinds of negative karma, and like desire, of course, it's negative, but it doesn't destroy roots of virtue, whereas the anger does both, and then also it becomes an obstacle to achieving higher paths, right? So if you destroy your roots of virtue with anger, then also you will set back your. So if you're, for example, a bodhisattva on the path of preparation, then you won't fall down to the path of accumulation, but it will make it take a lot longer to achieve the higher state. So then, of course, there's a debate there about whether a bodhisattva on the path of preparation can do that, but that's a different debate. These are big debates in Uma. And then Tsongkhapa, he gives quotations from several different texts saying, how do you destroy roots of virtue? There's several different ways. So like one is abandoning the Dharma. So beyond anger, there's also abandoning the Dharma. And one is, I didn't quite get clarification on what that one meant. It was one about looking with eyes of, what was it? Yeah, like, it's like you look at sponsors. So if you're a monk and you look at sponsors as, people as like out of desire, basically. I think the idea is that you have a mind that's mainly thinking about gaining material gain from the sponsor. And then pride also, he talks about. Pride destroys roots of virtue. So then if you break your monastic vows also, that's the Vinaya, like the main, we have the common faults of breaking your monastic vows. That's common to all of them, meaning there's uncommon ones that are specific to particular downfalls, but then the ones that are common are, what is it? So you're born in a miserable rebirth if you don't purify it. And then Shen.MO, so others lose faith in the Sangha. And then Le Tam Lam.RIM.CHEN.MO, right? So you won't, you can't participate in a Vinaya ritual. Le is choke, legi choka. Right, so that's why we do sojong. Right, so we first confess everything at the beginning of sojong. Otherwise, you're not allowed to participate in the recitation of the Pratimoksha Sutra. Because if you haven't actually confessed, if you've broken your vow without confessing it, and that's why before the ordination, then the Gelongs will perform sojong together before they ordain someone, because technically they can't perform the ordination if they haven't confessed anything. And then Lam.RIM.CHEN.MO, so you won't achieve higher states of the path if you break your vows without confessing it. And then it said, for example, that when there was a split in the Sangha during the Buddha's lifetime, then that for that period of time until there was a resolution to that, then no one was able to achieve higher states of the path. So it's a bit of a digression, but my point is that there's this question of when you dedicate, then does it actually make it invulnerable? So it's saying it doesn't. Tsongkhapa is saying you still have to be very careful. However, it will change it such that it doesn't just go to waste. You don't just lose your positive karma with like enjoyment and samsara. You dedicate it to the long-term goal of enlightenment. So de tar tsikte rakidun kowet chela. So then, having understood the meaning of those, yi shendu ma hyanwa. So with your mind not distracted elsewhere, dembu ji ke dempa shin du chena. So then, if you do as is taught in a leisurely way, meaning you take your time, you don't just rush. Sanagi popo pakta mepa zindo. So then you'll hold an inconceivable heap of merit in doing so. So de tarna, chak tang chipatang, gyuetang, suadapatang, yirawangani. So there's five of those. They're out of order for some reason, but there's the prostration and the offering, and then urging to teach, and then requesting, and then rejoicing. Those five. Tunken sokso bayana. So those five are for accumulating. Because remember, this whole part was about accumulating among the preparatory practices. The fifth one was accumulating the concordant conditions and dispelling the discordant conditions. So that's how it does that, is that those five do that. And then Shakpani, so then confessing, is Gelkyen Ripa Jongwa. It's it purifies the obscurations that are the discordant conditions. So Yirangi Chok Chi, Rangi Gewa Chipala, Gawa Gompani. So then also one aspect of rejoicing, because there's two aspects of rejoicing. It's rejoicing in your own virtue, and then it's others' virtue. So Yi Rangi Chok Chik, Rangi Gewa Chipala, Dawa Gompani. So the meditating on your own virtue, Rangi Gewa Pewa Yang Gyuro. It becomes a cause to increase your own merit. So I guess that meditating on others' virtue doesn't increase your own merit, but it accumulates new merit in doing so. So then ngoeni, so then dedication, right? Sapatang, Jawatang, Pewe Gewa Nam. So the virtue you've accumulated from accumulating. Yeah, virtue you have from accumulating, which is the five limbs, and then from purifying, which is the limb of confession, and then increasing, which is that aspect of rejoicing. Ningui Ang, so though it might be small, Che.MO then though it might be small, it becomes great. It increases. Negasu Trebu Chungde. So in the short term, it will bring a result. Chung, like to cause something to be born, to arise. It's like it will give a sprout of a result. Zepa Gira Nam Kyang Nam Yami Zepa. So those that would otherwise exhaust themselves will never exhaust themselves. Mizepa Chepate. So to do that, do not. Sapatang, Janwatang, Peljing mi separ chepa sum duo. So then that's the way of doing that is condensed into these three, into accumulating, purifying, and increasing. So those were the first five of the preparatory practices, the Jorchu, right? So there were what do we have? The cleaning the place and then making offerings, and then preparing the seat, and then the way of sitting, right? And then we have the discordant conditions and the concordant conditions. So then the last one now is offering a mandala, right? That's not often presented as the sixth preparatory practice, but that's how it's still a little different here. So dene nikpa sawa chene. So with a clear visualization, mandal pu. So then offer a mandala. Shenya lama gupa ne. So this is what we call the prayer of the three great purposes, right? Lama R.I.M.CHEN often encourage people to recite this after a mandala, especially. So if you offer a mandala at any time during the day, then you make this prayer of the three great purposes. So you might recall we were doing this when we were doing the pujas for R.I.M.CHEN in that week after he showed the aspect of passing away. So Shenya Lama Gupane da Nisu Semar Zimpe Bagi Chinji Logi Lona Tarak Nudu Kapatan. So from the disrespect or non-devotion to the teacher, da Nisu Semar Zimpe Bargi. So up to the apprehension of the sign of dualistic appearance, right, which is talking about the white appearance, red increase, black near attainment before achieving the clear light, the tantric realization, the completion stage. So Jinji Loki Lo Jinji Loki Lo Na. So all those kinds of mistaken minds, Tarak Nudu Gapatang. So they may they cease. And Shenya Lagupane, Da Mebede Konani Dope Baragi. So then from devotion to the teacher up until the realization of the suchness of selflessness. It's a bit odd, isn't it? Because it's a little not quite parallel. The first one had the highest obscuration being the tantric, according to the tantric path. Now here it's according to the sutra path, realizing emptiness. So Bargi Jinji Malope Nona Tarak de la Tukewa. So that may I easily generate all of those correct minds. And Chi Ta Nagi Barche Tamche Nyewa Shiwa Jingi Laptu Soul. So then I request you to please bless me to pacify all inner and outer obstacles. She len mongtu tupatrapo, so many times with fervent aspiration, so it upper chow, then make this request. So then we have the Nuji, right? So that was just a preparatory practice. Now we have the actual meditation session. Nuji la, jidar kyangwala ni, chi kyongsu tang, kapti kyongsu. So the general way of sustaining a meditation session, and then in this particular context of meditating on the devotion to the teacher. So dambo ni gon she drapa. So this thing that's well known as meditation. Sem kewe mikpala yanta yandu tebe miknam kyongwa dini. So what is it? It's this sustaining pointing or focusing the mind again and again on a virtuous object of observation, and then sustaining the observed object in the subjective aspect, right? So in this context, when you're meditating on the teacher, that the observed object is the teacher, the appearance to your mind of the aspect of the teacher. And then the subjective aspect would be whatever meditation you're doing. So you meditate that the teacher is a Buddha, then that will be the subjective aspect, right? So Mignam is a common term in Lorik, right? So you have just any mind as a Mignam. If you think sound is impermanent, then sound is the Mikpa, the observed object. And then Nampa is impermanence. Right? So then here, the teacher is the Mikpa, and then Nampa is Sangye. So Dini, Topamebane Rangs Semgi. Tohme bene rang semgi wangdu gyurching. So from beginningless time, my mind has been sengi wangdu gyurching semrangi wangdu magurla. Oh yeah, I see. So from beginningless time, I've been under the power of my own mind. I haven't been in power of my mind. I haven't had control over my own mind. Right, so there's a difference there. You can, as it says in psychology, modern psychology, it's a nice phrase. You have the feeling rather than the feeling having you. Right? So this is what it's happening here. Your mind is just out of control. So it's not that the feeling itself is bad. There's nothing wrong with having emotions. But if the emotion is having you, meaning that the emotion is controlling your behavior within in you and their thinking, then that's not very helpful. But if you have control over it, then you can actually utilize it in a more effective way. So that's what he's saying in meditation, is to try to increase that ability. So sem kyang niwampala sope dripa nam la jesu chokpe. So also one's mind has been inclined towards the obscuration, such as afflictions. Right. So Nyekun Tamche Keper Chepe Sem Di. So this mind, which generates all the faults, all the Nyekun is like all the wrong things. So all the problems I'm having in my life, they all are coming from my mind. Rangi Wanda Girwa Chene. So then so you now take control of your own mind. Gewe Mikpala Jitar do do do. So right, so for the purpose of gaining the ability to make your mind serviceable as you like towards a virtuous object. So deang gang zin zine mikpa kyang. So as much as you can, then to sustain that observed object. Rang jitar dupatargi, so as much as you want to do so. Gewe mikpa trong did samtang. So such observed virtuous observed objects, whatever number you wish. Gorim di jin tong. So wishing that I want to meditate them on them in this order. Nyamne. So thinking that tayang dro miniempe jira duba jindu. So then, yeah, once you have placed your mind in that way, then you won't pay attention, I think. Zhuo Minyan means you won't listen to going, but it means you won't pay attention to the mind wandering somewhere else. You just stay focused on your object. Du bijin gewe mi balak you do lungwe gek chempo gyurshing. Right, so then it becomes a great obstacle to so then it's saying, if your mind, if you're not able to do that, right, then it becomes a great obstacle to making your mind serviceable as you wish, that your mind just goes towards other objects. You don't have control or wish the ability to meditate in this particular order on these particular objects. So, dambo ne lang du song wei se hrilpu gejong kyun chen du droho. Right, so the point is, if you do so, right, if you do just let your mind go wherever it wishes to go, then you'll get in the habit of doing that. So Ylang Du Song is like Kaglang in yeah, I didn't actually think of that before. Kaglang, sure. Right, so the word in colloquial, Kaglang, right? It's this lang, which is to get spoiled, right? But you know what kak means? Anyone know what kak means? Yeah. So kak is basically, I mean, to use the non-colloquial, which is not, I mean, the vulgar term, which it is in Tibetan, it means shit, right? So kak lang, so spoiled and shit. That's the colloquial term. It's like kagzun she. It's the same kak, right? So lying, saying. I mean, it's like Jabba Kelton said. It's like saying bullshit, kagzun, right? So kag lang in colloquial, but in literary, then it's just lang. So lang means to become spoiled or to become negatively habituated with something, right? So you say the child was kaglang shor, he got spoiled or got in a bad habit. Also addiction, same thing, kaglang shor, right? So then kaglang tang is like you spoil someone, you give the child too much, and then he gets into bad habits. So long du song way. So if you do that, then you will get spoiled in that. You'll get, it's not quite the right word, but I think you'll understand. You'll get negatively habituated to behaving that way. So say rilpo. So for your entire life, then gejong kyunchen de gyuro. Then your practice of virtue will become faulty if you get in this habit of just letting your mind go wherever it wants. So dena tomar gang kyangwa chawe mikpa namgi trong tang gorang ngenge cha. Right, so from the very beginning, then you should ascertain exactly what objects you want to meditate on and in what order. So dene jirangepa dele. So then, as you've ascertained, then from that, shendu matongwa chao. Think I'm not going to do something else. Nyambe pempa trakpo kashik tangwa. So you take a particular some strong pempa. It means to impel, right? But so you impel yourself strongly in that way. So jirang ipa dele. So then, just as from that, whatever you ascertained, lakje mepar. So without doing more or less, right? Not too much, not too little. Drenje jintang. So chen je jintang dempar. So with mindfulness and introspection, kyangwar chao. So right, mindfulness means recollection, right? You recollect the objects, it's memory. If you can't remember what you're meditating on, which often happens, especially at the beginning, then you'll naturally lose it. But also, sheishin means your introspection. You're aware of what's happening in your mind. So likewise, you're thinking about this and this object, but you're not aware that actually your mind is getting distracted. Then you'll lose control of that. So this what it's saying here is don't let your mind just go to whatever other object, right? Like we say in meditation, in general, something might be virtuous, but it can become a distraction to meditation. So you're trying to meditate in emptiness, and you start thinking about practicing generosity. It's not wrong to think about that, but it distracts the mind from that. So like we will get to this much later when we have the section on jine. You have tropa, which means mental scattering, and there's three kinds of tropa. So there's tropa that's motivated by desire, and then there's tropa that's motivated by anger, and there's tropa that's motivated by virtue. Right? So the desire, that's gyupa, that's excitement. So then the question that arises is, why is it that we say the main obstacles to concentration are jinggu, right? So jingwa and gupa, laxity and excitement. So why focus on excitement if there's all these different kinds of tropa? It's because that's the most common and the most difficult to get rid of. So when you're meditating, the most likely reason that you'd be distracted is out of desire. Desire, the gyupa is a subtle kind of desire. It's not like you start thinking about, necessarily, you might, but you don't necessarily start thinking about this wonderful object that you're attracted to. It's just that you start thinking about various things that your mind is slightly inclined to just go towards them. So that's excitement, they say in English. You're just thinking, oh, that would be nice, that would be nice. And if you're meditating, you're not necessarily even having that thought. It's just that it's appearing to your mind. So that's gyupa, right? Whereas you have control. It does happen, but it's unusual when you're actually alone meditating that you'll suddenly get very angry at something. It's more likely to happen in the heat of the moment, as we say. And then with the gewa, it does happen, but it's less common. So this we'll talk about much later with the jine. I mean, it's a very subtle thing. I personally feel it's not so easy to express because sometimes you can think you're distracted when actually it's not quite distraction. It's very different. That there's one thing to lose your focus and one thing to access subtler levels of your mind where you have to be kind of present with what's happening. So that's a bit of a question of how that works. But I think it takes a lot of practice is the main thing. It's not something as easy, and that's why I think in the monastery there's always this question of why do we do so little meditation, at least in terms of the traditional sense of seated meditation and focusing. And the idea is that if you practice debate for years and years and years, it gives you a very strong kind of mental focus that's first of all effective for seated meditation, but also becomes a kind of meditation. As we've been doing now these studies of the brains of the monks, which Geshe Nobu has really been pushing for that, saying how important it is to show that it's not just words. The Gelong saying, "Oh, we do meditate, we debate," and then people say, "No, you don't." But it's showing that people who debate actually there is some change in their that's measurable in their ability to focus. So even though there's drilling going on next door, you still can stay very focused on the object of meditation or on the teaching here in this context or on the debate in the courtyard. You don't get distracted even though everyone is yelling. And not just yelling, but yelling at you, right? So there's the ones yelling around you, but there's also the ones who are telling you, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And, that can be that's probably the best practice is being able to stay focused on despite that. So I was saying that so the debate, it gives you the ability to stay focused and have that kind of meditation, and also to be able to do seated meditation in the future. And I think also it gives you a lot more ability to just structure your thinking, and to, as he's saying here, to be able to think, I'm going to go think of this, then this, then this, in this order. That's what we train in again and again every day here. So then Kabdi Kyongsu, right? So we had the general way of sustaining a meditation session. So now it's in this particular context, the way of doing so, in the context of meditating on the teacher. So Dampo Dembe Peyon. So first thinking about the benefits of relying on a teacher. Sange Nyuru Topa Sopatang. So that you will quickly achieve enlightenment, and so forth, right? We have the 8 benefits. I think you talked about this earlier. So we don't have to go through them again. But there's 8 benefits that are listed here, so that I'm thinking about those. But then benimik de tong. So then also the faults, the drawbacks of not relying on the teacher or relying improperly. So that was also listed earlier. Chimar dungyal kewasok. So the fact that in the future you will experience, in the future life, you'll experience suffering and so forth. So thinking about that. So dene lame kyun do belu ye mi sha ye majorwa cha. So thinking that may this thought, this mind that conceives of faults in the teacher, may that mind never arise at all. Or may I never, sure, as like lose, may I never be lost, lose myself to that, or lose my concentration on keeping the mind in a positive state. Dom sem mang du tang. So then this mind of restraint, right? So mang du tang. So keep bringing up that mind of restraint. So trim tang ting is in dan shet up tang. So then the three trainings, right? So the ethical discipline, concentration, and wisdom, and also dupa sok. So then the hearing and so forth, all these qualities that you see in the teacher, rangi gang dupa nam, so all those ones that you recognize. Someday, think about those. Sem dawai napa chenki depa maki gibardu gomo. So meditate meditate in this way until your mind gains this lucid faith. Right? So dawai napa chenki depa. That's one of generally they call the three kinds of faith. Right? You have ngondagi depa, dawai depa. So yichipe depa, dawai depa, and ngondagi depa. Right? So yichigi depa is faith of conviction. Right? That you're convicted. This is correct, and this person is a valid source. And then dawai depa is lucid faith. Is kind of like that you're feeling a sense of emotional response to their qualities, that you think how wonderful this is. So this is in Parchen, the first year, you talk about Dawai Depa. You gain Dawai Depa in the three knowers, right? The Kensum. And then Ngundagi Depa is the wish to achieve. You have faith with the wish to achieve those qualities yourself. So meditate like that. So then Rana Pendapa Tang Dopa Girwe Kandrin Nam. So all the kindness, right, of benefiting you. So sorry, having benefited you and being benefiting you in the future, going to benefit you in the future. Ngar dode nam trumpatar. So all what was talked about in the previous sutras that he cited in that explanation. Samde ning tapane gupama kegi bardu domo. So then meditate until from the bottom of your heart you generate this sense of respect. Or sometimes it could be translated as devotion. That might be more effective. Right? Respect. His Holiness says that you have depa in Buddhism and gupa for other faiths. Right? So you have respect. You see, you have faith in Buddhism, that you should have respect for other faiths, even if you don't have faith in them. I said other religions to make it clear. You should have respect for other religions without having faith in them. Right? So here, it shouldn't just mean this kind of bland respect where you say, I respect you, respect me. It's more, devotion is more of a sense of real force in your feeling of, that I want to follow this person's advice and feel a sense of gratitude, maybe you could say, for what they've done. So Juktu Didar Chawa. So then at the end of the session, how to practice. So we had the preparation, right? The Jorwe Chudruk, the 6 preparatory practices, and then the actual session, which was pretty short. But the rest of the book is really about that, right? So that you can just fill in this actual session with whatever meditation you're doing in the rest of the book. And then, and now we have what to do at the end of the meditation session. So sape gewanam, so all that whatever virtue that you've accumulated, zampo chopatam, so like in the King of Prayers, or molnam dunjuwa, so the 70 verses of prayer. This is a text that's attributed to Arya Sura. It's not one we recite very much, but it's an Indian text, right? La Zopegone. So those and other dedication prayers. So in Gebuk, usually we do the 8 prayers, right? Those Monam Gepo is usually referred to are the most common dedication prayers. So that's the Sangju-Chenmo, and then Jampe Monam at the Maitreya prayer, and then the Chunju Monam, so the prayer from the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, and then Tok Tama, so the prayer for virtue and beginning, middle, and end, and then Dimun, right, so the prayer to be born in Sukhavati, and then Jisima, right, so it's just as long as, it's a short prayer by Tsongkhapa, so as long as, GC, Zubid, GC, yeah. It is, until I achieve enlightenment, basically, is the point. And then Jampe Kusuk, right, so the prayer for the statue of Maitreya, that's by the first Dalai Lama. And then the Dechen Hundrupma, right, the prayer for spontaneous bliss, which is by the second Dalai Lama, which is also a prayer for a statue of Maitreya. The point is just you choose some of these different prayers. Of course, Tsongkhapa wouldn't list those because they didn't exist. He wrote most of them, so, or they were composed after him. So there wasn't this tradition of the Monam Gepo then, but nowadays that's usually what's done in Gilo. And then sometimes some people have the Sangdu Monam, right? The Guye Samadra prayer, so you have a tantric prayer as well at the end, or whatever other deity you practice. But in the pujas here, right, when we do the Duzang, and then during Sanju-Chenmo, we do the Monam Gepo, and then we do Sangdu. So anyway, Negatan Tardaki Mune Nam. So then all of your objects of prayer, right? Mune is like the object of your prayer, the thing you're praying for. The temporal and ultimate one, so in the short and long run. Namzu Tumba Drapo Ngoa Chao. So then dedicate with a fervent aspiration. Dedipute Torong Tang Ngandru Tang. Chidru Tang Sude Tun Shila Gomperchade. So then divide your day into 4 sessions. So Torong is first thing in the morning. Right? So this is, in Dua we have this a lot. What is Torong? You have different kinds of Torong. Right? So it's actually before the sun rises is the first kind of Torong. You have Kyaring. Kyaring is when the sun, you just see the beginning of the sun, right? So then Torong, it includes that and other things. So even before sunrise you start. Usually it's said actually you should finish the first session before the sun rises, I think. And then take a break at sunrise if you're in retreat. So then Ngatro, so then the morning session, meaning the mid-morning, and then Chidro, the afternoon session, and Sude, so dusk, meaning after the sun is set. So Tun Shila Gomparchale, so meditate in 4 sessions. Deang Dambo Yun Ringna, so then first of all, for a long time, Jingugi Wang Dru Lashing, so for a long time, it's very easy to come under the power of laxity and excitement. De la Gomna, oh, so I see. If your meditation session is very long, that's the point. If you make your session too long, then you'll end up coming under laxity and excitement. So that's not very helpful. It's better to have a short session and stay focused than to have a long session and lose your concentration, get involved in laxity and excitement. So de la gomna lo chu kawe. So then it would be difficult to fix your mind. Fix your mind, meaning if you get in the bad habit, as he was saying before, then it would be hard to get out of it. Tun chun la drag mawar jang mawar cha. So in a short session, then you should have many short sessions, right? Sometimes it's recommended for beginners take 18 sessions a day. So rather than having 3 or 4 6-hour sessions, that would be a full day. then you should have 18. Maybe you could take 18 1-hour sessions. So then you get 6 hours left for eating and sleeping. Maybe you need a little more. But maybe 18 10-minute sessions. I think that would be a good way to start, they say. It's better than nothing, right? It's better to do that than to do these long sessions that you just trail off. So bom do betrola chigin. So then chigin chena. So then so do betrola chigi. So if you stop your session when you're still enjoying your meditation, that's the point. When you still wish to do so, right? Then chima re kyang juk ning de jik ning de shen de mon might say. So then in the future you'll want to meditate it again, right? Every time you start to meditate, you'll think, oh, that went really well last time. I want to do it again. But Mel Tongwet Sena, Shendu, or Shendu, it's a Namel, not Namel. So then when you see your cushion, then cute long, or then you'll get nauseated when you see your cushion. It's saying if you meditate too long, if you make your session such that you're just exhausted by the end, then you just see your meditation cushion and you'll feel nauseated. So you don't want that to happen. So Jungsei Dendu Sawana Tun Sing. So then when you get a little bit more stability, then extend the length of your session. De Tam Chelang Jora Hachang Dam Drakpatang. So in all of those also, you should not practice with this, be too tight, right? Extremely tight. Hachang Lubekyan, and don't be too loose either. Drawa Cheba Kyangde, right? Of course, there's I'm sure you know the analogy that the Buddha gave to the sitar player, right? That said if you make your string too tight, what happens? Well, then it breaks. And he said, what happens if your string is too loose? Then there's no sound. So you want to make it not too tight, not too loose. Then you'll have a very pleasant sound. So likewise with your meditation, not too tight, not too loose. You'll learn that also here, just being in the monastery, how to go through the debate program. You don't want to be too tight, but you don't want to be too loose either. Either way, you have obstacles. So I think they say sometimes you have to find out for yourself. One person's tightness is another person's looseness, right? So if you look at, like I mentioned, Geshe Rabten, someone can read his autobiography. I think his middle ground was a little bit too tight for many people. I think somebody gave me that advice that was his middle way, but that involved not sleeping for days at a time, and I don't think most of us could do that. But you have to find what's kind of the mid-range for you. So now, Geg Nyongxing, so then now if you do like that, then you'll have not too many obstacles or hindrances. In the Hachang, Dupatang, so you won't get exhausted. In Jingmuk So, Shiwa Gyoro, then you'll pacify laxity and lethargy. Right? So here you have lethargy instead of, well, actually, not instead of Gopa, right? But Jingmuk are two different, so you have Jingwa is laxity, and Mukpa is lethargy. Lethargy is a mental affliction, right? It's a nyomon. So it can be non-virtuous or it can be neutral. Where Jingwa is not a nyomon, it's not actually a mental affliction. So Jingwa can even be virtuous, right? Jingwa, so Mukpa is like if you just feel like you want to go to sleep and you feel kind of too lazy to do practice. But then Jingwa is Jingwa is not something that you usually would have, right? You only get Jingwa if you're actually meditating and have reasonable amount of concentration. Then you're not having Mukpa, because if you have Mukpa, you just lose it altogether. You fall asleep. But if you have Jingwa, you're meditating, but it's not totally clear. You might think it is, but your mind is a little bit lax, right? Slack might be a good word. Like it's not quite in focus. So that they're grouped here together, right? Jingwa and Mukpa and so forth. But Jingwa comes from Mukpa, it says. You have the mental factor of Mukpa, the affliction, in general. So then when you meditate, then that affects it. So sometimes I think you can see this. I mean, it's hard to say. You can't judge another person. You don't know. But so not to point at anyone in particular, certainly. But sometimes you'll find somebody who's meditated for years and years, and they're very relaxed, we might say, but a little bit too much so. It's like they're just kind of not quite there because they're not so focused, or that could be the result of a little bit, putting the mind in laxity and thinking that's deep concentration, which is they warn about here again and again. It's rather dangerous. That's why it's said that it's recommended not, although it's a lot of people like to do, but it's recommended not to try to achieve calm abiding by focusing on the mind, right, as the object. It's better to focus on an object that, like the Buddha body, because then you can tell if you have laxity. If you're focused on an object that you visualized, then if it's not in focus, you can see it pretty clearly. You can see, well, all I see is a gray blob or a yellow blob. But if I see a very sharp focused object, then it's very easy to measure that. But if you're meditating on just your mind and the conventional nature of the mind, then it's harder to recognize if the mind is dull, because there's nothing particularly to, it's sort of a reference point to say how the mind is focused or not. So tun samla jidar chawa. So then how to practice between sessions. So chir chak tang korwa tang. So generally you could prostrate or do circumambulation. Tang. Kandun so. So then reciting, doing your recitations, right? And so forth. Duma shikyukyang. So there's many, but but the main one in this context, tunging all bene. So if you've made effort in the actual session, then tun tongwai tsamsu. When you give up the session, kyangyu miknamla trenche madempa. So it's saying whatever meditation you were doing. So you're meditating on the teacher. You should maintain that, although you're not meditating single pointedly. You should not just not meditate on, without mindfulness and introspection. It's saying you should have those. So if you don't have those, gya yendu tong na. So then if you just let your mind go wherever, right? Gya yendu tong is and then in the chunjuk, right? Semgi lambo yentang way. So if the elephant of your mind is just led astray, right? Is let to do whatever it likes. Semgyan lentong way. Narme number chipatar, lanche madu new bai, denedetar no migur, right? So if you the excruciating suffering that you will bring yourself if you just let your mind, the elephant of your mind, do as it pleases and just yentang, like just let it go, then the suffering that a wild drunken elephant or crazy elephant could inflict on you cannot compare with that suffering that your mind can bring to you. So gen gayin du tama, right? And also there's that there's the 5 verses, the what's it called, the Song of the 5 Mindfulnesses, something like that. I thought it was attributed to the 7th Dalai Lama, because His Holiness taught on that at Gyume. But now I was reading, it's actually supposed to have been taught by Tsongkhapa, and it was a secret practice, and then it was written down by the 7th Dalai Lama. So that also, there's the five mindfulnesses, and in each verse it ends with Sem Gyayandu Matong. Don't let your mind just go wherever. And then it says, place it on this particular object, one of those 5. So that's what it's saying here. When you're in your between sessions, don't just let your mind go anywhere. Try to, as much as possible, to think about the object that you're meditating. Kendutana. So if you do that, ke shindu chungwai. So then there's little ke in this context means benefit, right? It's not like generate. Ke means gift, right? But it means benefit in this context. Shindu chungwa. It's very small benefit. Tun samsu ang detar dumbe chu nam tawatang. So then even in the between sessions, then whatever dharma was taught, tawatang yanna yandu trempacha. So then think about it again and again. Right, so observe it and think about it. Yonden kewe tunken. So then the concordant condition for generating qualities. So go dumane sokjing. So then accumulate virtue, or the accumulations, through many ways. So that's what he was saying before, like to prostrate and kora and so forth. Gyoken dripa jama ang go dumane cha. So then also through many ways purify obscurations, which are discordant conditions. Tamjigi shi gang kelampe sung dorma. So then also the basis of everything, meaning the vows that you've taken, right? So kelampe sung dom. So those really, they're restraints, right? Restraints is the right word, but it's translated as vows often. Those vows, guarding vows that you've taken, or guarding restraints that you've taken. Gang shepe gone pede. So then, whatever you know about them, you should make effort in that way, as much as you're able to do. Mikdana lo janwatam. So then, training your mind in the observed object, in the aspect, and it's dom trim tang. So then the ethical discipline of guarding vows, and it's sok sumla. So those 3 things he's saying, that those are the 3 things you want to be mindful of, is maintaining the object of meditation, guarding your vows, and then accumulating merit. Sum Dildut Ming Dakne. So then put those all together as one, and then it put Ming Dakne. So then it's given one word, Tripiang Yodo. So there's also a way of explaining it where they're all condensed into one, like one group. So Zhenyang, Shine Laktangilam, De Latu Kewer Gyur Girbit So, Shilayang, Laparchade. So then likewise, you should focus upon those 4 ways of accumulations that became easy to generate calm abiding and special insight. So these 4 we'll talk about next time, but just the names. So Wombo Dampa, meaning that you guard your sense doors, and Sheijin Du Chupa. So then you behave with the introspection in a way that you intend to do so, right? Like as you wish to, as opposed to not behaving in the way that you didn't wish to behave, that you wish you hadn't behaved that way. And it's a gitsurikpa, right? So eating the right amount. And I mean and practicing the yoga of not sleeping. Tsunjing, say. So then when you do sleep, when you do lie down to sleep, jidar chawa, how you should practice when you actually do go to sleep. So he has these 3 things here, right? Training in the object of meditation, and then guarding your vows, and then accumulating merit, right? So then also that's Kappa. There's the advice that Mandrishi gave to Tsongkhapa about how to practice, right? Which was to make single-pointed requests to the teacher inseparable from the deity, and then to accumulate and purify, and to engage in very strongly in analysis of the classical texts. So it's a little different, right, than this what's talking about here, but there are different emphases, I suppose. That's more of a general advice for how to practice. This is specifically how to guard your mind during the post meditation. Okay, so yeah, why don't we stop there for today? Is there any questions now today? Yeah.
2 questions. One,
okay.
Is there a reason given for the teaching that jealousy and anger destroys your roots of virtue, but attachment doesn't? I was just curious what that is sourced in, that assertion.
Source, like is there a sutra quotation you're saying, or what do you mean?
What's the reason?
Yeah. There's several quotations he gives. Yeah. So first of all, there's one from the it's Konsek, I think, is the sutra. It's the heap of jewels. So there's the sutra about the Buddha says that if a monk makes prostrations to the stupa, then he will accumulate as many Dharma to be born as a wheel-turning king as atoms that his body touches. But then, if he gets angry afterwards, then it will destroy that. So that's one that's given. I think that's the main one. But there's, yeah, I have to look and go Barabzil again. That's the main one that's talked about. But I mean, then of course, Tsongkhapa is quoting Chandakirti because Chandakirti talks about this quite a lot. And he talks about how, right? So this is the accumulation of merit versus the accumulation of wisdom, right? So he's saying that the merit accumulation is unstable, right? It can fluctuate, whereas the wisdom accumulation does not fluctuate in that way. It will remain stable. So that, like the wisdom realizing emptiness, will not be destroyed by anger. But the merit accumulation, it fluctuates, and so you can, like he's saying, you could be a bodhisattva on the path of preparation, but you destroy your merits. You have to reaccumulate that in order to be able to advance. Now, why does anger destroy the merit and the attachment doesn't? Yeah, it's a good point. I think I don't remember particularly that we debated that. Part of it was unfortunately. Yeah, that was the first year of Gombrabzo when I was stuck in Nepal and we didn't during the COVID, so we never got to debate that. So hopefully during the LAM class we'll be able to debate it more. Um, but yeah, I think the idea in general is that anger, uh, there's a different kinds of non-virtue, right? So the example of anger is like a fist, right? It just hits like that, and it doesn't, it immediately makes this strong impact. And of course, it has far-reaching consequences, but it's also easier to just get rid of in the sense that you can stop it right away. You stop being angry. Whereas with desire, they say it's like it's kind of pressing the butter into a piece of paper, right? So it doesn't have this strong immediate impact, but it just permeates the paper, and it's extremely hard to take it out to extract it from that. So likewise, if you have desire, it doesn't have this immediate consequence, but it's extremely hard to get rid of, right? If you're angry and you think about the disadvantages of anger, and you think about how this person, in a correct way, you think about, well, this person is only acting this way for this and this reason. It's not that hard to get rid of anger. If you're very attracted to somebody, you can think of all the reasons that attraction is harmful, that it's exaggerating the object, but it doesn't make it go away very easily. It's better generally just to remove yourself from the object. In that case, is generally the advice that's given. So I think that has something to do with it. That the anger has that kind of force to do that. But I wonder also. I mean, if it's this kind of, if it's 100% that way, it's like, oh, this always does this, and the desire never does. But that's a good point to debate. So when you're in Uma, maybe you can debate that. And when I get to the Ladaramba class and we study Gompa Absal again, then that's something we'll definitely to bring up.
Jealousy, just in your question.
Yes.
You meant it as jealousy destroying or not destroying?
Destroying. I think that was what conversion was.
Oh, it wasn't one of the ones I mentioned, but I think it might have been. There was 6 or 7 that were mentioned in Gompa Absal. He took them from several different sources. I think jealousy might have been one of them. To look. Yeah. Of course, the other thing also is jealousy, traktok, right? It's a secondary mental factor, right? So, secondary affliction. So secondary afflictions are always one of the main afflictions. They're just like permutations of that. So you have chorwatang, tsikpatang, right? So you have like malice. Malice is anger. It's a particular kind of anger. It's the wish to harm somebody. And then sikpa is spite, is also a kind of anger. It's like, it's not this strong, forceful wish to harm, but it's like annoyance with somebody. And then you have kongzin, is the holding grudge. It's also a kind of anger. So those all are anger. And then you have like like gupa I mentioned, right? It's excitement. It's a desire. It's dochak, but it's a specific kind of desire. So traktok is considered. It can be either dochak or kontro. If it emphasizes that I want this, I don't want you to have it, I want it, then that's desire. Whereas if I'm angry at you because you have this, that also can be jealousy, and that's anger. So in that case, really, you don't have to separate anger. Jealousy is a separate mental state from anger.
Is that the difference between envy and jealousy? Or?
Well, envy in English, right? In Tibetan, envy. Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think. I remember this coming up once, so I think there was a. There's not none of those 20 mental factors would translate as envy, but I kind of remember in reading the text, it'd be like ngam, right? Rangatanga, masa ngam. It could also mean like anger, like you say, like hayagripa, right? Gegla ngambesha, hulu humbampe gidre, hayagripa gegla ngambesha. What is it? What is it? Anyway, in the Hayagripa, the word ngam appears there, right? So Hayagripa has an appearance of fierceness, but in another context, ngam, I think it's translated something like envy, because it can mean like a fierce kind of desire, like wanting to have something that someone else has.
Here does come as Kroda.
Yeah, it's kroda. Yeah, Hayagripa benza kroda, but in the other context, it means something else. Anyway, that's a we can discuss that later, figuring that out.
Yeah, I think then just I cut down everything. Just the second question was, you were mentioning that the wisdom side doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
And it just from observing, I think, what about those who have broken their vows?
Mhm.
They have this strong dullness in the mind and cannot see much, that it comes together with so both types of affliction seem to increase a lot.
Mhm.
Like somebody who was, for example,
Mhm.
then taken up drinking and everything, even though they then seem to become very, very dull, and you can't really get through to them. It just seems a lot of timok.
Well, okay, so yeah, with any teaching, we have to compare it against evidence in the world, right? So that's a good point. I mean, one way I would argue there maybe is that in terms of destruction of wisdom, it doesn't mean that somebody can't become dull. That's obviously can happen, but a level of understanding that's been cultivated is still there somewhere in their mind. Whether it's like it's being obscured by this dullness. I mean, like the same way somebody can be very intelligent and they have Alzheimer's or dementia. Obviously, that changes, but somewhere in the mind, that wisdom is still there. Will continue to be there in the future lifetime. That's the main thing. It's not just talking about one life. What realization they've cultivated will remain, but the level that sounds more like the fluctuation of merit, that they still have the wisdom, but their brain isn't working because it's some kind of damage. That might be one way to see it. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We can finish for today.
My two collections, Master Space,
Yes, I'm working at evidence practice for a great length of time and become a chief leading Buddha for all those whose mind are raised on by ignorance. Even if but outrage of the state may be held in love and compassion for all my lives in Monastery, find the complicitly created paths of the teachings, and please all the Buddhas from my practice. These ancient feelings, along with the strong force of compassion, clear the minds of all beings, the points of the path as I have discerned them. Those Buddhist teachings for a very long time. With going out with great compassion, whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, once spread have declined, may be this treasure of happiness and aid. The minds of those who wish for liberation began to find his peace. Their desolates and nourished for a long time. Even has created the path to enlightenment through the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. In beings committed adversity, the excellent paths never be parted from any of their lives. This path praised by the Buddhas. One makes an effort to live with their own virtues and virtuous practices. May always be assisted by the mighty ones. May visions of prosperity spread everywhere.